Hello, everyone. Welcome to this very, very special event. Um, when Nancy and TP asked me to moderate this, I was super excited because so many things that are close to my heart, women's voices, violence against women, so many things, so I'm really, really excited to introduce today to you Carole Fisher and Anna Sinfield from The Girlfriends, which a podcast which we've all heard of and all kind of applauded as they won a lot of awards at the British Podcast Awards where I was recently, and also I think the Ambies and everything else. So I wanted, before kind of I started talking about The Girlfriends, I wanted to actually get the origin story from the both of you. How did The Girlfriends start? Tell us in your own words.
Okay, well,
Anna,
I guess
you need to take that. But I just want to say thanks for having us. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I guess maybe that will start with me because it did originally fall on my desk from another team member at Novel because I'm the producer. And somebody had found this story I think they were doing a research session at the British Library, and they were going through kind of the old reels of articles that have gone out. And I think this was one that was in the New York Times. And they found a very kind of brief excerpt of what went on to become The Girlfriends. And it was this story of a group of women in Las Vegas who started to suspect that their ex-boyfriend perhaps was responsible for the murder of his first wife. And it had kind of all of the juicy details that were exciting, but also it was like quite poignant as they started to reflect afterwards when it became serious, that what started out as a kind of gossip over some lemongrass chicken noodles ended up being something that was very serious and kind of reflected their own experiences. But it did kind of stop there because this was an article from back in 2000 and there was no kind of progression of the story. Also, everyone in the article had pseudonyms. So when I was handed the story as the journalist who needed to start reporting it out, I had to find all of these women with completely different names who had, other than doing this article, gone completely under the radar. And it took a few months of digging around, but eventually I found Carole and Mindy and Elaine and everyone else that you get to know in the show. And then, yeah, I reached out to you, Carole, and you were like, what the fuck? I haven't thought about this for a long time. So maybe I'll hand it to you to take the rest.
Anna, we've never really talked about how you found me, so that's a whole other story. But I'm glad you found me. And Anna reached out. I get an email on one random Tuesday from Anna, who's over in the UK, asking if I would be interested and willing to talk to her about my experience of dating someone who murdered his wife. And for some reason, I said yes, that I would meet with Anna, which was unlike me. It was uncharacteristic because I had turned down every public interview. And as Anna mentioned, we did pseudonames to protect ourselves and our identity. And so I met with Anna and I was immediately curious because she's just a gifted artist with her craft. And her care and concern about women just came through the Zoom square. And so I was hooked and interested to sit down with Anna, although I canceled a few times because I was a little nervous of bringing this story back up. But we met in Las Vegas, and Anna and I took some time. I showed her around the city. We spent some time at my mother's, and Mindy joined us. And it was shortly thereafter that Anna asked me to host the podcast. And quite frankly, I didn't even understand what a podcast was. And I didn't know that true crime was a real big thing, a genre. So that kind of was an interesting journey, wasn't it, Anna?
Yeah, I think for both of us. But I think that combination of, obviously I've been doing this for a long time and, reporting and writing stories like this is my beat. But Carole came to it with her own very authentic story and also way of being. Like, I think if you knew what podcasts were and you had hosted a podcast before, you wouldn't have been nearly as good, you know? So it was that kind of lovely coming together of making the most of our two skill sets to make something hopefully that felt quite normal and relatable, despite it being a completely kind of wild and shocking story.
I'm with you on this, Carole. When I was starting my podcast, I had to Google what a podcast was because I didn't know. So I
That's
was entering this
great.
competition that I went on to win for Spotify, and I was like, it's a podcast, but what is a podcast? I actually Googled it, and then I filled in the application. So I'm completely with you.
You totally understand. And look
I
at you
totally
now.
get it.
Yeah,
I
congratulations.
totally get it. Thank you so much. But what the Girlfriends is iconic. We've all heard about it and we've kind of, discussed it with our friends and things like that. I'm very curious to hear from both of you. Are there any kind of moments in the beginning, particularly Carole, where you're like, what are these? Are there any moments for the both of you where you really remember, either during the making of it or after, or anything that's kind of stayed with you, that's been resonant for you?
I've had so many moments of aha moments, of clarity, of complete utter shock, and sadness. I mean, I've just experienced a full range of emotions during producing or hosting as Anna produced. And so let's talk about the prep work. I think Anna, to get me ready, Anna started feeding me a lot of stories and information and the transcripts of Bob during his appeal to the parole board. And that was extremely overwhelming for me at times. I had told myself a story that, yeah, Bob murdered his wife, but it was an accident. And I had a great amount, great just denial going on for me. And so, Anna, I'm sure you remember. I mean, now I'm reading this going, what the fuck, as he's admitted it. And really coming to grips with the fact that Gail was a human being whose life was cut short. And yeah, so it was an emotional journey for me at times, very much so. And I think,
Thank
Anna,
you for
for you
sharing.
too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think obviously what comes out at the end of a podcast is something that feels quite you hope I don't know, tight and interesting. It's got all of the right beats in the right places and it feels snappy. But the reality is that, I'm still working on the Girlfriends now, 3.5 years later. I have gotten to know a lot of victims who sadly I haven't been able to get to know in person, but I have gotten to know their stories through their families, through their friends. And I think that's the stuff that stays with me the most, because you end up becoming the sort of torchbearer for people who aren't around anymore. And in order to make their memories and make them feel alive, I have to spend months and months and months making them alive in my head and trying to become their girlfriend, trying to become the friend to them. And so often I think the stuff that actually hits me the most is I've spent quite a bit of time in New York now since reporting on the first series, and I've gone back a few times. And whenever I'm there, I kind of walk around and I go, oh, this was Gail's favorite museum, or this is where Gail used to come and sunbathe with her best friend Denise. And that's actually the last place Denise saw her. And even though, of course, I don't know Gail, and later on we did a second series about a woman called Heidi, I obviously didn't know Heidi either. They become real to me. And so it's not just a case of, it's not only when I'm in New York, but those are people that stay with you. And, there's lots of people who remember them. So I don't want to aggrandize like what we do, but I do feel a responsibility in our work to make sure that they are remembered. And in order to do that, I think myself and Carole have had to kind of really take them on, and you remember them forever.
Yeah, forever in our hearts. And Anna it did such a fabulous job in season one and season two of talking about and giving life to and shining light on both Gail and Heidi in a way that they deserved, not to be remembered as victims of domestic violence, but rather remembered for who their whole entire life was. And I am so grateful that, I feel very close, and I'm so grateful that we got to know them differently. And I still today feel very close to Gail, and I feel very close to Heidi in such an odd way, because we didn't know them. But to be a voice for them has been a true honor and privilege.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think with topics like domestic violence, I mean, it's easy in many ways just to, when it happens to somebody else, to sort of, for us to sort of not be connected. I talk about this because I'm writing about it. I grew up in a house, my father was abusive. He was alcoholic and he beat the shit out of my mother every night. And I'm writing a book about it now. And it's, domestic violence affects every single person it touches. It affects people who are left behind. It affects, it's affected every single part of my life. And to this day, it does. And as I write about it, and I write about my mother, I'm trying to do that balance of not just making her a victim, but making her a whole person. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and very deeply at a very personal level. So I just wanted to say that to you. I'm kind of bang in the middle of doing this book, So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And and thank you also for doing the work that you both are doing around it, in various ways that you are. It's very, very important. And too many women, this is so normalized in so many societies, including India. I live in the UK, but I'm Indian. It's accepted as like, oh, that's just part of how it is. No, it isn't, even today. So I think the work you do is very, very important. I just wanted to say that. I know it's kind of off topic from an interview, but I just wanted to say it.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. If somebody would have told me prior to the girlfriend that I'd end up being an ambassador for No More, their first ambassador, and be a face for domestic violence, I would have kind of chuckled. But it's really been an eye-opening experience that, 1 in 3 women have experienced domestic violence.
Yeah.
And what's happened as a result of the girlfriends is women reach out, and certainly as time's gone on, it's not daily, but it was multiple people daily in the beginning through my social media channels, just thanking me and thanking Anna and thanking Elaine and thanking Mindy for shining light and being a voice. And it was a real movement, continues to be. So it's amazing the women that have experienced domestic violence and the mothers and fathers and the siblings and friends. I mean, it's just unbelievable that Anna, really gave voice to the issue of domestic violence on a much larger scale. And I love that I was part of that, because it's very meaningful, purposeful work.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. From that, I wanted to come to the experience of creating this podcast. Now, Carole, you're a storyteller, you're a creative person. Anna, you're the producer. And you probably, I'm guessing, come at it from quite different points. You've got to meet somewhere in the middle. So during the making of The Girlfriends, was there any conflict? And if there was, how did you kind of get past that, dish the dirt?
Well,
Carole, I'm going to let you go first.
yeah, well, let's be clear. Anna wrote the script. So I had complete editorial rights, which was very kind of her. And I always, made minor edits, mainly that Anna was from the UK. And so some of the things that she had to say had a British vibe to them, and I needed to put them in my language. But Yes, things that we disagreed on. I can't think of any big hassles, Anna. Did we have? We had a lot of laughter, and we certainly had. I was in a recording studio here, right outside of New Orleans, that wasn't optimal, and so I had a lot of swear words because these trucks would go by on the interstate, and like every 2 seconds, I'd have to redo, and I kept saying fuck, 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 fucking truck, fucking truck. Do you remember that, Anna? I mean, that was the biggest, but I don't think of any conflict or do you, Anna? I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, I think most of the conflict would have been between me and the assistant producers who had to edit out all of those trucks and fucks. So, but no, yeah, I think we actually got on really harmoniously. It was a really lovely collaboration. We worked at our own pace. This was a brand new thing for Carole, and so I couldn't come in and say, oh, you should be doing it like this, you should be doing it like that. Carole, the magic of it is that she was coming into this story as a central character, a normal person, not just some stuffy journalist like me, and so if things took a little longer, if there are a few fucks here and there, that wasn't a fight that we needed to have. I think we just got on so well. Also, Carole treated me so well when I went to visit her. And so I ended up in my own little apartment in her place, and the fridge was stocked with like every vegan thing from Whole Foods ever. So I think it was mutual aid. We looked after each other. No
Yeah,
fights.
well, the Jewish mother comes out of me all the time. So I kind of adopted Anna, as did Mindy, as did Elaine. But when Anna stayed with me, I wanted her to feel at home and be comfortable. And that was fun. I got to take Anna to her first Mardi Gras parade. And
So good.
right, yeah, so it was fun. I have tremendous respect for Anna and her craft. I am in awe of her talent. I just applaud her and sing her praises. You know that, Anna. I've told you so many times. So
Being a Jewish mum again.
yeah, yeah, totally Jewish mom. I got to play you up and play me down. Yeah. But we have I think a very respectable, good friendship today. Are we always in agreement? No, we're not always in agreement, but there's an opportunity to just be real with each other. One of the things that Anna allowed me to do and really wanted me to do was just play me. And that's what I did. I just performed Carole as a host. And what I loved about that, I know how to play me. So I didn't have to pretend I was someone I wasn't.
Yeah.
And when I would do interviews, when folks post, production asked to do interviews, they would always say to me, well, you sound just like you sounded on the podcast. And I'm like, because I performed me. And so this is, who you get. And I every day say shit and fuck, and it's just part of who I am. And we were able to take a very serious, important conversation topic and really do a nice blend of some humor with it. So I think that Anna did a remarkable job of making sure that the heart of the issue was taken care of, but allowing us to come in and use some of our wit and humor and Jewish mother isms, if you will, I think came through in the podcast.
That's brilliant. That's really, really lovely to hear. So obviously the girlfriend has won loads and loads of awards and accolades and all sorts of things. Are there any that have particularly been more meaningful or stood out to either of you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I didn't even know what an ambi was. So,
Oh, that is the sweetest thing.
yeah. And so I felt like a fraud because you had all these people showing up to that were being nominated, and they do this for their living. I mean, this is their full-time commitment is podcasting. And here I am, Anna and team, sends me to maybe see if we win an award. And I'm like a fish out of water. I feel fraudulent. And the first award that they are going to do is the True Crime Award. And of course, we win, and I am in shock. I am overwhelmed. I am in shock. And it takes a lot for me to get to that place. Like I'm never short on words. So my husband is pushing me up on stage and I don't even know what to say. So it was a remarkable experience. I'm glad we have it on video. I'm sure it will live a long life in my family and with my friends. But I don't know, Anna, that was a remarkable experience for me on this side. But you've won so many awards. Yeah.
Yeah, but this was the first Ambi, and I had wanted an Ambi for a decade. So it's actually quite a funny phone conversation between me and Carole, because I was there going, "Oh my God, like my dream has come true. I've gotten an Ambi for true crime, like the ultimate category." Honestly, it was such a big thing, and I'm not just saying that because this is the Ambis, but it was such a big thing for me. And Carole was like, "Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it was fun."
And I'm apologizing. I remember calling Anna saying, I am so sorry. Like this was a big deal and I got up there and I froze. And I'm so sorry I didn't mention your name. I think I said like, Anna, I hope you're watching or something. Anyway, and Anna's like, you were great. You just performed you. I was just typical me. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't realize what a big deal it was until after we won. And then of course, I'm still a little bit in shock that yeah, it's amazing. And you know, that award goes to Anna and team. I mean, they produced told an amazing story, and I'm just privileged to be the face of that story.
So lovely to hear both of you talk. It's just beautiful.
Thank you.
So a lot of people watching this will be TPA members, they're podcasters. This is kind of what they do for a living, and the accidental podcaster like me also. But what I wanted to ask you was, do you have any advice for podcasters listening and watching in terms of how they might create something that wins awards, something that wins hearts in the way that you have? And I wonder if both of you could address it from, Carole from a storytelling point of view and experience point of view, and Anna from a production point of view.
Well, I think authenticity and being relatable is key to success. I, I I can't begin to overstate that. I don't know, Anna, you're going to do a better job at answering that question, but I do believe that if you're taking on serious subjects and you're going to dive in, then you need to be respectful and of not just who's playing what part or who's hosting or whatever, but then the audience. And yeah, but Anna, this is your area of expertise, certainly not mine.
Well, I mean, there's also, if there was a formula to making a award-winning show, I'd be selling it. But sadly, I don't think there is. But I guess I do have certain mantras that I live by. And I can only speak from a narrative nonfiction perspective because that's what this show is. So chat shows, that's not my beast. But I think one of the big things is that if you're going to tell a story in a long form format like this, it needs to have enough beats to survive the amount of episodes that you are going to be doing. Often commissioners, they say we need 6 or 8 or 12, which is the scariest number. And you actually have to have a story that can sustain that. I think after you've decided you've got a story that can sustain that, then the art of telling a good story is when you reveal certain things. And so having, really structuring it, really thinking about it like you are telling a story. And all of those story structures are out there. Obviously, I could quote a bunch of theorists on that, but every fairy tale is an inherent sexy story structure that we all love to hear. Our brains want to go into that forest and we want someone to slay the dragon and then come back changed in some way. Those are all things that you should be copying. And then I guess there's a slightly more philosophical thing that maybe is just me and just the way that I've approached The Girlfriends and some of my other shows, is that you really have to decide what your philosophy of that show is, what your point is. For early on with the girlfriends, when I first started it, it was presented to me as a story where we kind of celebrated the weird and magical mind of Bob. And that's how a lot of true crime series are obviously done. It's kind of, how interesting is this dangerous man or this killer? It's not necessarily that you herald them, but you are kind of perversely interested in them. And I hated that because I'm not actually much of a true crime person myself. And so I said, no, the thing that's interesting to me is how the women came together and they shared information, and how that kind of like beautiful power of gossip became life-saving. And so often in my friendship groups and women that I meet and interview, that's the like magic of what sisterhood is. And so I decided that the foundational principle of the girlfriends was going to be this idea of sisterhood and female friendship. And that meant it changed the way I approached every part of the production, even if it was down to our production team, which was predominantly female. We looked after each other. We loved each other. We were gentle with each other. You know, we gave people space when they had period pains. You know, we like saw it as a real sisterhood. But then also even the music, I was like, that needs to sit within that world. So the music became a representation of female voices. When the women in the story came together, so did the choir that was soundtracking the series. And then you could never kind of leave that track that would set the train on. Everything had to answer back to, does this actually kind of successfully show our ultimate mission of that women are powerful when you bring them together, and they can find lightness in the darkness, and they are not one thing, they are not one victim, they are also funny and silly, and they make mistakes, and they're rude and they swear, but also they are like powerful divine beings, and they can, you know, take on the justice system, and they can take on a killer and win. And so even if it's not a show that's as easy as The Girlfriends to kind of assign that to, there's kind of lots of ways that you can pick that philosophy and then stay with it. And it really helps inform big and small decisions.
You know, Anna,
Absolutely.
one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is, so it also, in addition to, includes your relationship with the people that you're working with, like me,
Yeah.
and Mindy and Elaine. I mean, you had to manage us, and you did such a good job of doing that. And I don't know, I think it deserves some conversation. We even videoed it when you were here, for others. Yeah, maybe you should talk about it, because I think that's an important element of how you created this safe space and connection for us to tell the story.
Yeah, well, I was just really, I think relationships with your contributors is so, so important for them revealing the most intimate parts of themselves, which are the most relatable parts. And so I think you hear even on the show, there's points where Gail's best friend, Denise, she breaks down and cries, but you can still hear that I'm there, and I'm kind of holding her hand and I'm telling her it's okay. And I'd spent a lot of time with Denise. I'd done multiple calls. I've obviously spent so much time with Carole. And although there needs to be a professional distance in the fact that I'm a journalist, I have to report on the truth. I could never put something on the podcast that I have read in a legal document turned out to not be true, and everyone understands that. But I'm also there to look after them, and I know that this is a kind of a scary experience, and I want them to know from the off. I always ask everyone, like, what does this podcast need to be to you? And that massively informed how the series went. You know, Elaine had like a lot of very understandable demands when I first met her, that she needed it to be a certain way. And while she was like, after a while, we built trust and formed a friendship, she was happy to let me go in my direction. There, you know, things like donating to a charity was really important to her, making sure, I always said from the beginning, I want to have a whole episode where Gail is just alive. I don't want an episode where she's, you know, she's always a victim. And that was something that Elaine really resonated with. And so these stories, they have to be a give and a take between the reporter and storyteller and the people who are telling their stories. You know, it is as much theirs as it's also mine as someone who's interpreting their stories.
Yeah. And something I wanted to add as well, actually, when we talk about what makes good audio, what makes a good podcast, I think sometimes we have a tendency to sort of get stuck in the technicalities or the layers of it. But actually, in my own experience, I started a podcast, like I was saying, without any idea how to do it. And I've ended up winning a lot of awards. And to me, the core is humanity. So each time, what you've done, Anna, with Carole and everybody else, and what I do with each guest is I'm a human connecting with another human. And that's pretty much it. And when I stay in that truth and that authenticity, and I'm not a host, I'm not a podcaster, I'm just a person. And I want to know what touches you and what hurts you and what heals you. That is powerful.
Mm.
And I think that's the stuff that makes for good audio and wins awards, And we sometimes forget. We're so caught up in the thing, the shiny things, that we forget that actually that is incredibly powerful.
And that's the essence of what a podcast is. It's just conversation, and you can boil that down and edit it into anything, but it's just human chat.
It is human chat and allowing each other to be human, really at the core of it. Something you said, Carole, I wanted to just come back to. You were saying about a lot of people reaching out to you when this came up, women who had experienced domestic violence or families. I wonder if you could talk a little bit, because I'm really interested to know. So one is we have, the awards and the True Crime podcast, and it's this big thing. But I'm really interested to know how it affects people, how it helps people, how it's helped women that you've come across.
Yeah, I have a lot of new girlfriends. To the extent that I don't even know if Anna like truly understands or appreciates. I'll give you an example. There's a woman in Los Angeles, California, that had reached out to me very early on, was inspired by the podcast, felt a real connection to my voice. She had experienced domestic violence herself, and would email me and talk to me about how I was shining a light on her story and making it more normal for her. And with the part that I say Anna doesn't realize, I mean, now, California's under fire right now. My hometown is Las Vegas, which is 5 hours away, and I'm offering this woman a place to stay if she needs to. She's become a girlfriend, and I can't explain what that means to me, to have that ability to help other people, help other women feel connected and cared for and heard and understood. So I could keep rambling about that, and now I'm off point of your question, actually. But
No.
yeah, it's just been an incredible experience to make these connections with other women who felt alone, and they hadn't felt heard, and they hadn't felt valued and appreciated, and that domestic violence was defining them. And I'm here to say that anyone who's experienced domestic violence, we get to own our story, and that doesn't have to be the narrative. That just needs to be a chapter. And so how do we take that chapter and put it where it needs to belong? Because that's not a life sentence that women have experienced domestic violence, especially when they're on the other side of that. Yeah. So it's been just a wonderful journey. I'm a social worker by trade. That was my background. That's what I went to school for. So all those skills have come in handy to help and support women that continue to reach out to me.
Really. And to me, like, that's the power of podcasting. I mean, I've been very passionate about podcasts, and this is why, particularly for women. And, I can go on one about the lack of women in podcasting and how that's such a problem. But because what I see from hearing you talk, Carole, and also from my own work, this literally changes the lives of women. I get women writing to me all the time because I do a South Asian feminist podcast, and they say over and over again the same thing. You make us feel less alone. You make us feel understood. You make us feel heard. I've had women say, somebody met me. I'm in Kerala right now. The last time I was here, someone met me and said, your podcast helped me leave an abusive marriage. So it's so powerful. We've got women sitting at home or in their cars or going for a walk and listening to this stuff. And they listen to you, Carole, and they listen to me, and they listen to other women podcasters. And they draw courage and energy and hope. And to me, it's so important that there are more women creating podcasts for women, touching on topics like this, which are super, super important. Anyway, I'll shut up now because I can go on about this for a long time.
No, I mean, you've created a safe space for so many women, and I just applaud that. And for me to be part of that, my whole life purpose is always to make the world a better place. My entire professional journey has been geared to that. So what I didn't see happening or coming is that the Girlfriends was going to be helping so many people, and the impact has been huge. I'd say that hosting the Girlfriends is probably one of the most memorable experiences of my life, both personally and professionally. It's just made such a huge difference for so many people, and I don't take that lightly. And it's a responsibility that I feel I have to answer every woman that reaches out to me. I always take the time to stop and be still and to keep in touch with those that continue to stay in touch with me. And there are so many. It's just unbelievable. Yeah.
I do the same. And it's
Do
almost
you?
like I can't not reply. I just
Yeah.
cannot not reply, whoever it is, how many ever times, whatever time of the day or night, because it feels critical to reply. So I absolutely get that.
There was a woman who is a cardiologist. She had listened to the Girlfriends, I believe, 20 or 30 or 40 times. It was some outrageous number, and she wanted to talk to me. She was in the UK, but had gone, I think, to Ireland. Anyway, I took the time on a Saturday and spent an hour on the phone with her. It was the right thing to do. And, I didn't want the credit for her healing. I wanted her to understand that she was her own superstar. She had her own superpower, and that was real important for me to help her not give credit to Anna or me for the success of her healing and leaving a domestic violence situation, but for her to own her story. And she needed to be her own champion. And she keeps in touch with me. She's an amazing, amazing young woman.
That's really, really powerful. So I wanted to talk about something we're in the midst of, the times we're in. It's a really, really tough time to be anybody that identifies as a woman in the world or, minority in any way. And at a time when our kind of rights are, being really pulled away, why do we think women's stories and women's voices are important? Why is it critical to produce and create more shows like yours and mine and others? Why is it?
Boy, Anna, you're in the middle of continuing to create the Girlfriends, so maybe you should go.
I think ultimately women's stories are important to be told in the way that hopefully we all are, because we are half the population and those stories matter. I don't think it needs to be any more complicated than that. Sadly, it is.
Yeah.
And part of what we're doing that is unique is creating a space where those stories can be. And I think there's something kind of more than that. Obviously, the stories that include women have been included in true crime specifically for a really long time. But it's about telling these stories where women have agency, where women can say stuff in their own voices. And that's something that, is really important on the Girlfriends. you know, people come. And we obviously, with the first two series, Carole was there front and center. Mindy was by her side. Elaine, you know, really told the story of her sister and her own battle. And then when we got into Heidi, it was so important to me that I found the family, and that was so difficult to do. It was one of my, you know, the biggest kind of journalistic challenges I've ever had has been finding her family. But that was because that was the way we could really get as close as we could to Heidi being able to tell her own story, and the people and the women directly affected by her death to be able to tell their story. And so, yeah, I think it is just important because sadly, a lot of these stories, as you guys have discussed, represent a lot of women's experiences out there. And podcasts are a really incredible, relatively safe way of hearing stories without people around you knowing that you're listening to them. And so people often talk about how when we hear that people have listened to the girlfriends, part of it is that you can listen to it, and as long as nobody's looking at your listen tos on your apps or whatever, you're getting all of this information about how to survive domestic violence, how bad things can be without somebody seeing it. And that's powerful, and I think is kind of an interesting and novel way that we can give people this information and hopefully the keys towards a better and safer life. But also because women do really cool fucking things. So like, I don't, you know,
Yes.
I don't want to get down too much in it. Not everyone's a victim. You know, we're telling stories now on the girlfriends, and, you know, they're yet to come out, but they will. But where we're including stories of, you know, the very first investigative journalist who was this kind of wild woman who just kind of put herself at total risk in order to tell great stories and help women who are kind of currently going through some bad stuff and expose injustice. But she herself was a proper hero. We're interviewing rock stars. Like, you know, there are people who are doing amazing things and they just happen to be women. And because of that, other mainstream press aren't telling their stories in as much of a full way as we can. And so sometimes it's an important thing to do because it's a form of kind of activism, and it's a way of reaching out to people and hopefully survival. But also sometimes it's just because women have great stories to tell, and we love a natter and a gossip, and there should be spaces for that because that's all good things. What do you think, Carole?
Yeah, I mean, I think women's stories just humanize complex issues, and it creates a space to know that, it, you know, in today's world, there are certainly some challenges that we as women are facing, but we're not alone in facing them, and I think we're stronger together. So that just resonates with me. The girlfriends, the sisterhood and the friendships continue. So I know I mentioned the people that I've never met in person that have become girlfriends, but the fact that Elaine has been, she now is a dear friend. Heidi, who you know, we talk about, and Anna figures out who that torso was in season 2 and takes a lead in that with Mindy. Um, I am dear friends with her aunt today. I love that story. She lives 10 minutes from my home. How's that for a bizarre coincidence in a time when I don't believe in coincidence? So, you know, there are people that are now in my life that were meant to be there. And, you know, Heidi brought me together with her aunt and her family, and they are now forever friends. We don't lead with talking about Heidi. We lead with talking about each other and what's keeping us up at night. And a fun fact is Heidi's 85-year-old aunt just recently married me, and Vince. She actually performed the wedding ceremony with our friends and our family in her home, which is an old church. Like, crazy things have happened, just creating the most meaningful moments in my life, and it's just fun to reminisce and talk about and understand that the importance of telling stories creates new stories and creates new memories and new friendships. And here we are with that. So it's not lost on me that the power that the two of you have with podcasting is larger than you think, and makes continued footprints in people's lives.
Wow, that's really, really powerful. So I'm now going to do the thing I should have done before we started the conversation, which is talk about the girlfriends and introduce the two of you. I got so excited that I jumped straight in. So I've got notes to just say that the girlfriends has, I think this is from your LinkedIn, Anna, the girlfriends has hit #1 in 6 countries, amassed over 14 million downloads, won the Ambies, as you've already mentioned, for Best True Crime, and so many other awards, been optioned for TV, has inspired over 1,500 people to reach out to the domestic violence charity helpline, released 2 soundtrack albums, and raised money for charity, and been in the press and several, magazines all over the world. And Anna Sinfield is a multi-award winning journalist and creator behind iHeart's #1 hit that you've just heard about. And Anna's reported on stories of many, many amazing women who fought injustice. And, she's done loads and loads of incredible work. Carole Fisher, who obviously is the host of Girlfriends, but is also a keynote speaker, globally recognized advocate for women's empowerment, is also the president of the National Partnership for Healthcare and Hospice Innovation, which is a very big advocacy group that serves as a voice for nonprofit advanced illness care providers. So that's a little bit of an introduction for both of them, which I should have done right at the beginning, but I'm like, I really want to talk to you. I think we've got 1 or 2 questions. Let me try and jump in. Oh, sorry, someone's just saying 1 speaker at a time. That's just an admin question, so I'm just going to leave that. And has anybody else got any questions? I don't think so. If anyone else has got questions, I think now would be the time to just pop them in the chat. And yeah, so while I look for that, I'm just going to ask you what's ahead for the girlfriends. What's next, Anna?
Oh, well, we're kind of yet to announce that, so I don't know how much I can say, but what we do have in store is way, way more. That's the kind of long and short of it is the feed is now going on to have multiple episodes. Some of them are going to be big blockbuster series like the first 2, so big narrative ones. Some of them presented by women at the center of the stories themselves, not much like Carole, but they're telling their own stories, and that's really important. Some of them are going to be hosted by me, where you need more of a journalist kind of investigating something.
Yeah.
And we're also going to be doing some individual episodes where we can kind of tell one person's story in 1 episode, and it will still have that narrative heft, but be a bit more of a chat show. And there's some amazing people lined up for that. So lots ahead. It's very exciting. And this is certainly not the end of the girlfriends, and the family keeps kind of growing and growing and growing, which is gorgeous.
Which is amazing. I'm sure all the fans will be very excited to hear that. And Carole, what's next for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm a big fan of Anna's, so I'll continue to support her work and whatever I can do to help her achieve success. I don't think she needs my help, but she's well equipped. As for me, I'm doing more public speaking on issues that really impact women in leadership roles, women that are aspiring to live their best authentic selves and making sure that their story is their superpower. So I'm spending some time doing that. I'm doing more executive coaching one-on-one with women. I'm still at the helm of the National Partnership for Healthcare and Hospice Innovation, which is near and dear to my heart. One of the wonderful things about shining a light on domestic violence is that we've been able to shine a light on elder abuse and neglect. And that has come out of the work that we've done on domestic violence, understanding that it's a silent epidemic amongst the elderly. And so through my work and the partnership, we're shining a light on that and creating tools and advocacy opportunities for our members, which is wonderful. So yeah, I'm busy off in a new direction, and kind of where I left off before I met Anna. I'm just a little bit on steroids. That some of the things have elevated because of the success of me hosting the Girlfriends, which I will just forever be grateful and continue to be humbled and honored and energized by the work. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful to hear. That's it from me. I mean, that's what I wanted to chat to you about. Is there anything else you'd like to say, either of you?
Well, I would just like to say thank you, and you're a rock star in your own right. So it was just
That's
wonderful
so
to
kind.
have you interview us.
Thank
So
you.
thank you so much.
Thank you. That's
Yeah,
really
thank you so
kind.
much.
You know, when you mentioned about being like feeling like a fraud, like I often feel that at like podcasting events, especially back in the early days, I'd be like, what am I doing here? So thank you so much.
Thanks, Sangeeta.
It's been a real joy. It's been a real joy to speak to both of you, and I'm gonna follow your journeys. And thank you so, so much. And keep doing what you do for women, and you know, just keep going.
And hopefully I'll see you at some podcasty thing in London.
That would be amazing, Anna. That'd be
That'd be
really, really
great.
good. I saw pictures of you at the BPA, and I obviously we didn't see each other.
Yeah, next time.
But yeah, next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It was a pleasure.